Let's get started. First off, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm DJ, the head of marketing at Entitle. We expect the event runtime to be close to 30 minutes, and I do hope that you get the most out of it. Some rules of the road. Let's go to the next slide. Some rules of the road. Please use the Q&A area for questions to the speakers. You will find the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, along with all other buttons on your Zoom bar. So please use that button for asking questions. There's also a chat button that you can use to raise any technical issues during the course of the event. The recording and the event deck would be shipped out to you post the event. With that, let me introduce the speaker of the day. It's Lalit. Lalit is the Chief Technology Officer at Entitle and has been at the forefront of designing both SaaS and AI-based applications in the industrial space for decades. He's one of those industry leaders who loves to get down into the trenches and has immense expertise in all things related to install base. Lalit has a phenomenal grip on technology, its applications for machinery manufacturers. And when he's not at work, you'll find him posting some really interesting stuff around AI on LinkedIn and a bunch of other platforms. So in case you don't follow him, you should do that today. With that, let me hand it over to Lalit.
Thanks, DJ. It was thanks for the introduction. And good morning, good evening, whoever is whichever part of the world. Thanks for joining us today. So what we'll do is that today we will look into AI, and we will also try to understand what artificial intelligence stands for. And then we will relate it to the basically what the interest of the crowd out here is, that how it can really help in the aftermarket growth. So first, let's just understand the aftermarket growth essentials. What are the pain points that aftermarket leaders or the sales leaders, or especially the industrial OEM organizations, they struggle with? First and foremost is the visibility aspect of the things. Where is my installed base? I think that's a very, very common question that we keep hearing day in and day out. And it's very interesting because in the new equipment sales kind of scenario, it's usually one or two generation of the equipments that the sales team of the new equipment has to deal with. But aftermarket has to usually deal with like multiple generations, sometimes running back into decades kind of thing. So it becomes very, very important to understand not only like where is the installed base, but every bits and pieces, every details around that equipment, so that they can service it better, or even they can figure out more things around that one. And then it goes up to also like what is my wallet share, what are the upsell, cross-sell opportunities, and then this whole notion of how better to service them. But if we broadly bring everything together, then what we struggle with is that, like, especially in the aftermarket scenario, there is so much of tribal knowledge, there is so much of things sitting in the head of multiple people that it is sometimes very difficult. And I'm sure, I think most of you would be able to relate to that one, that you know that like this person, they know each and everything, but it's out there in their head basically. And then we are also seeing a trend where we are seeing some of these folks going towards retirement, and at the same time there is a lack of resources. So these are all the problems that we are seeing continuously now in the aftermarket area, day in and day out kind of thing. So just before we start, I thought that I think I'll bring this computer, because at the same time we are also hearing a fear around AI. It's like, is AI going to kill the world? Is it going to make the humans redundant? I think it will be not right for me to say that which trajectory it will take, but we have seen in the past that multiple such events has happened in the history of humans, and every time actually it has led to more productivity for humans and more and betterment of life for everyone. And let's hope that it takes the same trajectory. It will help us, it will become a companion to us, rather than figuring out a way to wipe us out. So just how pervasive AI has becoming, I thought that will just run a small poll. So I am putting like there 3 paintings. So actually the same paintings. I just want to figure out, like, you have 4 options out there. Which of the painting do you think is not AI generated? So you see there are, and this is a very famous painting. If any of you have an interest in the painting, this is by Van Gogh. His style is known as Impressionist. And he actually did this painting when he was in a mental asylum and looking through his window. And the high part of this painting is actually, you see on the bottom part, it's dark, and on the top part, It is more hope, more light. So that's how he looked into the he was looking into the world basically. So DJ, I don't know how long we want to.
Yeah, let's just give it a couple of seconds.
Sure.
Yeah, it's interesting, it's all the horses seem to be running at the same pace. So I'm curious to see where this goes. All right. So I think, yeah, it's the poll has been running for almost a minute. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and
Okay.
launch the results. They should be on your screens now.
Oh, okay. It's fairly distributed. So the idea here is that like it has become so pervasive and it is becoming so intermingled with the day-to-day of our human life is that it's now becoming very difficult to identify what is AI and what is not AI. Of course, like there are negatives of that also where we are dealing with a lot of false news, but I'm sure we will start building more tools and more guardrails so that we don't run into those kind of issues. So, but just from the perspective that the B1 is the one that is actually was actually painted by Van Gogh. Rest of them are actually AI generated. So now let's get a little deeper and let's try to connect to what is artificial intelligence. So we talked about tribal knowledge, and what I want to establish also here is that AI is not something very different from the way we operate on our day-to-day basis. And we will see that where it that then does brings the difference. So when we talk about tribal knowledge, we talk about a deep reservoir product and customer knowledge. That is what, in general terms, if you that is what we called as the data basically. And then what happens is that people start recognizing those patterns. They build an intuition along the years of experience, and that's where there is a pattern kind of thing they start building in themselves. And then there are notions around probabilities where they assess the chances, and then they make judgments about like which path to take, which becomes the prioritizing. If you see that this is a very generic model, and let me make a little broader statement, is like artificial intelligence at the end of the day is actually the way we think we operate, but where it brings the difference, it brings the difference at scale. So again, to build on the same example, so some of the basic elements of any AI, or in fact, the way we operate is like we built intuition, which is basically we learn patterns along the way. We know that if we have to deal with certain persons who are around us, we know that how they behave. And we learn that pattern, and we learn about situations, we learn those patterns, and that gets built as an intuition into us. The same thing goes like in aftermarket as well for customers. Basically, we build patterns. We have patterns of how each customer is behaving, and understanding those patterns makes a difference in dealing with them. We'll look into this little more detail little ahead. Then how do we define a pattern? That's the second aspect of the AI or machine learning or anything. So for example, like when you're dealing with a person, some people may put a lot of weightage on their physical structure, like height, and that's how they make some judgment about the person. Some other may wait and would like to interact a little bit more before making a judgment. So what we are doing is that we are defining a set of features which we think are important to define that pattern. And that's how we define a pattern, we learn about the pattern. And then I'm sure like this normal distribution curve, everyone would have seen it multiple times. But the important thing here is that we also know that same situations or same persons may not behave exactly the same way all the times. There is a certain probability associated with certain kind of behavior or certain kind of action reactions happening more than the other kind of things. And that's where, and this is all gets intuitionally built into us. And that's where we actually put a term around it. We call it as the probability of the things. So for example, like I'm sure many of us, like when we were kids, we knew that when to ask for money to our parents, basically, because we know that the probability of outcome would be much higher at that point of time rather than at other times. So as we have building on the same thing, so what AI is doing is that AI also follows the same basic paradigms, but where it makes a difference is at scale. It is much faster. It can deal with a way high volume of data. It can deal with complexity in a much better way at scale. And that's where the AI will make the difference. That's where when it brings that scale, it gives a huge productivity boost. And that is the thing I think we should strive to leverage for. So, before I get further into like what we'll do is that now, as we understood some of these notions, hopefully this should give an idea, a model that how to look to artificial intelligence. And what we will do is that we will also then look into how this can be, we can apply them into aftermarket certain scenarios. Of course, like it's not an exhaustive list, but we will just try to see that in particular situations, how these techniques can help us. But again, I would again suggest that try to look into from this model perspective that there is a patterns, how do we define that patterns, and then it's all about probabilities, which helps us in prioritizing. But before we go further, I think just one word of caution that I really want to bring is the data quality. I think this is what you call is like this is the point which normally people don't give a lot of emphasis, but it's again gets into garbage in, garbage out kind of thing. In fact, at Entitle, we have this story, like we actually started as in, we focused on AI completely in the initial days of when Entitle was formed, but then we quickly realized that it's, if not, I think it's almost like 60 to 70%, the quality of your results is a function of the data quality. And that's where we actually spend a lot of time to making sure that once we are ready to run AI algorithms or data science algorithms or machine learning models, we have a good data in place, because that makes a lot of difference in the kind of results, in the quality of results that we are getting. So now what I'll do is that, like, I'll just touch upon on some of the basic use cases that's where the AI can start helping. And again, look from the same perspective. It's the same thing we do, but we can't do that at scale, which now AI or machine learning algorithms can do that scale. They can understand the customer base. It's fine. Like if there are 10, 15 or 20 customers, we can take in our head. 100, 500,000, maybe we can handle it in a spreadsheet with little bit of pain. Think about now when it reaches to 10,000 or 15,000 or 20,000. And that's where now the AI can come up. You can cluster the customer base. You can figure out their loyalties. And you can not only cluster them into one dimensions, you can cluster them into multiple dimensions, maybe geographies, maybe their buying patterns, maybe the kind of equipments or the kind of products they are buying. But what it helps is that it helps you to segregate them in a way that now you can deal with them as a group as well. And you can get more insight about your customer base. You can figure out if there is, who are the at-risk customers, who are the customers where we need to do something to stop the churn. And then also with this approach, you are able to even create customized approach to each of the customer. And this is where the at scale part of the things come up. Otherwise, if you see, like, that's the same thing we do, but we are not able to do these things at scale. Then the other part is the sales opportunities. That's what we are talking about, the patterns. Patterns become very important. We know that certain customers buy in certain way. But if you can figure out that, okay, these two customers, they have almost similar kind of equipment, they belong to same kind of industry, maybe same geography, but their buying patterns are different. So these all things can be surfaced out very easily, because we know that the one who is buying lesser, there is something that is happening that we need to know, because ideally they should be buying almost at the same level what the customers in the similar cluster are buying. So that's where I think you will start making. And then, of course, like we can also figure out the probabilities around this one, looking at these patterns, looking at their buying behavior. And then that helps in prioritizing the things. And prioritizing helps because when there are limited resources, you know that if there are 10 leads, only 5 resources, then the ROI becomes very important, that which 5 to take up. And then, of course, there are other cases which we are not getting into detail, but it's like it can even help into slow moving or obsolete inventory. All those things are possible. And again, like I'm emphasizing again and again, but that is what is possible at scale with these kind of models. Then I guess this is becoming with ChatGPT and all, we know that generative AI is making a lot of it's becoming quite popular. And what we are also looking at, we are also looking into very closely. I would nowhere claim that like we have got a complete good handle of this one. We are still probing that one. We are working with some of our customers who are partnering with us to understand it more. But we are seeing that I think generative AI in the aftermarket space is actually very, very relevant from the perspective that in the aftermarket scenario, take up like the manuals, a lot of service stickers which contain the resolutions, the diagnostics, which would have been built along the time. What is the easy way to surface those things and not only like surface them up, but make them available to service technicians or even to customer to troubleshoot, to figure out that how that was solved in the past. So that's where we are seeing like this generative AI can really make a lot of difference, especially in the aftermarket scenario, where probably the amount of tribal knowledge is most in any organization. So, and then it's just a visionary, I would again put it more like a vision kind of thing, but this would just help that like the way we are trying to look into is that there is this database AI, which we have been doing for long, but now we want to like merge it with the this language model based AIs so that we can bring the best of the both worlds, which can actually help in multiple dimensions in the aftermarket, not only in aftermarket sales, but service technicians can get a lot of help in diagnostics kind of scenarios. Then customers can get a lot of help with easy to use interfaces. They can do some basic troubleshooting. They can get warranty guarantee details. And of course, it can help in marketing in running very specific campaigns around certain kind of filters. So I guess, DJ, that's where I guess probably we'll stop here today, unless there are some questions.
Sure. I think there were a couple of questions that came in, but yeah, this was interesting. Thank you so much for laying it all out in plain speak for us mortals who don't understand a lot of the technology that goes behind making all of this stuff run. Questions were coming in as you spoke, but before we jump into audience questions, here's a quick takeaway for those on the call. Lalit, let's go to the next screen.
Yeah.
All right, folks, we publish and update the industrial aftermarket playbook at regular intervals. Lalit mentioned just some of the use cases that are possible with AI built into the Entitle platform. In this playbook, you will find many more such aftermarket growth plays that you and your team can look into. If you're wondering how was this playbook built, this book itself is derived from our learnings across customers and based on the strategies that they've deployed to grow their aftermarket. I think this book is derived from almost 350 billion assets under management at this point of time. And we keep updating this, refreshing it at a regular interval. So you can scan the QR code that's on your screen right now, or alternatively, once the event is over, you will be redirected to the web page in your browser where you can download this playbook. So with that, let's go to the questions. There's, I think there's 3 of them. Okay, let's look at the first one, Lalit. It says, what are the resources required, people or tech-wise?
Yeah, interesting question. So I would say that I think it has to be looked from a full-blown sort of a software / data engineering / data science kind of things. Also needs a lot of product management to figure out how the workflows need to be laid out. So if we look into the pipeline, it needs to start from the ability to extract the data from different systems. Then it has to be, the data has to be cleaned up, and that's like usually talking about millions of record out here at times with the big industrial OEMs. Then it has to be all consolidated and unified. So in terms of, and then there, of course, like the DS and the AI part of the things. And then, of course, like you would also need to lay it in such a way that there are folks who can build application layers and web layers on top of that one, so this data is easily accessible to them. So I would say that like there's like a lot of skill sets across this spectrum, right from data engineers, data scientists, full stack engineers, then the product managers, and of course like a lot of domain experts. But yes, it's possible, it can be done. It's just that someone has to look it from a very what you call the comprehensive view of the complete thing, so that the whole the solution builds in a very comprehensive way. Yeah.
All right, so let's segue into the next question. I think it kind of takes off from the previous one. The question is from Daniel, and they are asking how long these projects typically take.
Okay, so I think what we have seen is that especially in they can take a lot longer, especially if the right skill set is not in place. The other challenges also usually come is that to make sure that, because of course, like it's not just the skill set that is needed, also need a lot of tools in place. The tools which can help in data cleanup, the tools which can help in running algorithms, even if like someone is not writing it, it has to be used. So all those things has to come together and play together to make this happen. So uh, again, I think what we have done is that we have tried to look into it as an end-to-end kind of thing, and we have built all these things along the way. But usually what we have seen is that people who attempt it many times, like it turns out to be a multi-year project if things are not placed properly and someone doesn't have a good grip of end-to-end, that from where we are starting and where we want to reach kind of thing. Yeah, DJ.
There's a lot of nuance to that question and to that answer.
Yeah.
As you rightly pointed out, depends on a lot of factors. And I think we do talk about aftermarket maturity framework a lot.
Yeah.
At Entitle, that has a huge role to play in how an organization can execute and how soon can they execute these projects and start.
Correct. Because it's also very important to understand where we are at this point.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
then what is the goal that we want to reach to? And there is a gap between them. And
Yes.
the gap is not always in terms of, let's say, so there is like a lot of gap has to be filled through technology, through resources, but there is also a lot of cultural changes that goes hand to hand with these things to make this whole thing successful.
Absolutely. Lalit, would you, taking off from that question, would you say that there's a lot of experimental AI that's happening right now?
Yes, there is a lot of experimental AI happening because again, the thing is that it has a huge potential. We have seen that time and again. But what is also important is that like someone need to have a very comprehensive picture of what they're attempting, where they are, to get the right results in place.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, that's the key, having a set objective in mind. Otherwise, organizations can spend months, quarters, years, and pump, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars into these projects and get nothing.
Yeah.
All right.
And DJ, you have touched a very interesting point, because it's also very important that not to boil the ocean immediately, but figure out certain use cases which can give very good ROIs. Make sure that the technology aspect, the resources aspect, and even the cultural aspect of the things are validated on that small model before it is scaled out.
Absolutely. All right, so let's look at the third question that came in. I think we'll have to go back a slide for this. The question is from Pete, who's asking, can you explain industrial language model a little bit more? Yeah, so industrial language model is not very different from in concept what we are seeing in ChatGPT, what we call as large language models. But the idea of the industrial language model is that now, and we know that there are data security concerns with open source models or like the ChatGPT kind of models. What industrial language model the attempt here is that basically it's the same models, but they are basically trained on the industrial knowledge. May I call it like the industrial tribal knowledge, all the manuals, the diagnosis, the service informations, what was sitting in different design docs and things like that. But train the models into them in a very secure and isolated environment for that particular organization, so that the whole organization can get help out of them. So they could have very easy way to find diagnostic information, or even customers can interact with those interfaces in terms of finding more details about, let's say, basic troubleshooting or even warranty guarantee informations kind of thing. So in a nutshell, it's not very different from what the other language models are there. The difference is mostly in terms of that it is more focused towards the knowledge base of the industry, and it is basically it sits basically in a very secured environment, so that there is no issue of data sharing or data breach basically. So Lalit, would it be, for a layperson like me, would it be appropriate to say that this is more or less AI built for your organization
Yes.
or
yes.
data?
Yeah, we can say that one.
So here's the flip side.
Mhm.
There is a possible disadvantage there, which is you're not going to learn from data that's out there in other organizations, because then this is kind of a closed walled garden. And in that scenario, a platform, and this is probably, I'm bringing this conversation towards an install-based platform or an install-based automation platform, which learns from multiple organizations. Probably that has some role to play.
Yeah. Actually, when I talk about training, of course, we say that the organization data, but uh, taking care of like copyright issues and other things, but it can as well be trained on the data outside. What is not happening is that the data of the organization will never leave these models. The models, the information can still come from outside, and they can reinforce the learning that is for the data that is sitting inside the organization. So that is perfectly possible out there. Does that make sense?
I think it does. It does. Yep. I hope, Pete, that answers your question a little lot more. So, yep. I think we are. Yeah. I don't think there's any more questions. These are the 3 questions that came in. So, with that, I think we can go ahead and close. There's still 3 more minutes, Lalit, but I didn't see any more questions coming in. So folks, yep, we'll go ahead and send this recording out. JW from our team will reach out to you. We'll also share this presentation if you're interested. And of course, if you'd like to go ahead and download the playbook, here's an opportunity right after this event ends. The browser page that opens, or where you launched this particular event from, that will basically take you to this particular playbook. So feel free to download it. There's a ton of information that's in there. And yeah, do subscribe to it, because then we can always send you the latest updated copy for this playbook. Okay, so Lalit, with that, let's go ahead and call it a day. Thank you, everyone, for
Thank you. Thanks.
this event, and thank you, Lalit, for this informative session.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.